What does it take to get a YouTuber out of a nearly year-long hiatus? Well, it's a pretty simple answer, making a massive trade for one of my team's biggest superstars, Kevin Durant, being sent to the Houston Rockets in exchange for Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, pick number 10, and I think 5 second-round picks. And we can take a look at the trade details right here, put them up on the screen. This is a pretty good trade for the Phoenix Suns because you weren't getting a whole lot more than this. And there's going to be some questions of what we do from here, but for the Houston Rockets, I'm just going to touch on them first. This is more of a Suns channel, so it's going to be a lot about the Suns. But the Rockets receive Kevin Durant, who's an amazing all-time great scorer. You move off of a Jalen Green contract that's starting to look not so good after he underperformed in the playoffs and you lost in the first round to the Golden State Warriors. Dillon Brooks is looking for a new contract after next season, so he's also kind of an interesting one to deal with. And they still have quite a bit of cap flexibility, and you have all of your young pieces under contract for the next few years. You keep all the good young pieces and you move on from the ones you're a little bit unsure about. The Houston Rockets seem to be in a pretty good position by making this trade. Pick 10 is not a pick that made sense for them to keep, so moving on from that makes a whole lot of sense. And the Suns, let's move on to them. Picking up Jalen Green, Dillon Brooks, pick 10, and second round picks. This is a pretty good deal for them. And that pick number 10 looks very interesting to me because it's not a spot that makes a whole lot of sense for the Suns. If you look at like mock drafts and big boards, you're going to see a lot of guards go around that spot and a few like wings that teams might reach on at pick number 10 or in that range between like 8 to 12. It's a lot of guards. It's about like Jeremiah Fears, Kasparas Siakachonis, Igor Demin, and like I'm just not really convinced on any of them, but I'm also not in charge of the Suns organization, and that's kind of their decision. If they think they like one of those guards more than the others, maybe they might even look to move up to select one of those guards. But 10 is that weird spot where one of them might be picked before you get the chance to, and then you'd be left selecting from someone you're not as confident about. And I just don't think 10 makes sense for the Suns at all. And who else doesn't make sense for the Suns is Jalen Green. Like, for me, it feels like these are assets that are still looking to be moved. The Suns are not done yet, and I'm pretty sure this hasn't changed in the NBA yet. I haven't been paying that much attention over the past year, but I believe this trade is only agreed to in principle, so the Suns are still able to make trades up until the day after the NBA draft when all those trades finalize. And it's all that whole deal about like teams are selecting picks in principle for another team, which then get traded after the NBA draft happens. And so Jalen Green can still be moved, and Jalen Green makes no sense on the Suns. I think I don't really need to clarify that. Jalen Green, very good scoring guard, but you know, that's what the Suns are building around in Devin Booker. Jalen Green, he is on the younger side, but it just doesn't really make sense to keep a guard who is similar size to Devin Booker. Doesn't really make sense next to him. You already tried using Bradley Beal, and although the two are not exactly the most comparable players, Bradley Beal and Jalen Green, you have both under your contract on your team, and you don't want that. So the Suns' goal is going to be to move off of one or both of those contracts over the course of the rest of this offseason. I don't think you're moving off of Bradley Beal. It would have to take a lot to do it, and I'm not exactly sure what team would take him in at this point. I really only think it's like the Nets, and even then Bradley Beal has a no trade clause, so I don't even know. That's just such a mess. I honestly don't have a great way to trade Bradley Beal, but I do think there's a few teams that make sense for Jalen Green because he's not exactly the most untradeable player, even though the contract it hurts a little bit. Let's start by taking a look at the contract situation of the Houston Rockets so we can understand where we're starting from with the contracts the Suns just traded for. Jalen Green is starting the first year of his 3-year extension, making $33 million, and combined with the salary of $21 million of Dillon Brooks, adds up to the $54 million-ish that it takes to trade Kevin Durant's massive contract. And this $33 million is a pretty movable number. Dillon Brooks at $21 mil, I don't really think it makes a ton of sense for the Suns to move him. I don't think they're going to get a lot back in exchange for him. And I think it's just funny that we actually got Dillon Brooks now after the whole Marshawn Brooks debacle back in the day. That, like, I don't know, and something feels wrong about me, like, really throwing out things for Dillon Brooks. I'm pretty sure Dillon Brooks will play out the rest of his contract with the Phoenix Suns. They did a pretty good job negotiating that. He's making less money each year, and yeah, it just makes sense to keep him as kind of like a 2-year deal. The Suns are not really going to be looking to trade him, but Jalen Green's a guy who'd be under contract for 3 years, who doesn't really make a lot of sense with the Suns. And yeah, we're not doing the whole backup shooting guard thing again. We really need talent. So how are the Suns going to make it happen? I have 2 ideas, and I'm sure maybe if the fan bases of these other teams see it, they're probably not going to be the most happy, but I think they do make a lot of sense. The first one that I thought of is with the Miami Heat. Looking at the Miami Heat situation, the big contract I'm looking at is Terry Rozier, who is just kind of like a middling starting guard, and Tyler Hero, we know he's kind of like a 1/2. You make this trade for Terry Rozier. It's probably Kevin Love. I think that adds up to the right amount of money to make this trade happen. Terry Rozier plus Kevin Love plus pick number 20 in the draft, and maybe like a 2nd-round pick, or maybe throw in like a Pelle Larson or something. I don't know. But the Heat do have the very perfect cap situation to make this happen. They don't really have players they're super concerned about getting on like big extensions. Davion Mitchell's not going to make a ton. Duncan Robinson's going to make quite a bit less than he is right there. And they don't have to worry about these rookies until 27, 28. And that's when the last year of Jalen Green's deal is. So they don't really kick in for like Kello Ware or Jaime Jaquez, maybe also a dude who's not going to get a massive extension. You're in a pretty good cap situation because you also have this Andrew Wiggins that's going to expire after 2 years. Kyle Anderson's expiring after 2 years. And it's a pretty decent cap situation for Jalen Green to make sense on the Heat. You're replacing Terry Rozier with another much better scoring guard and tiny bit more size, not that much more, but a player who makes at least some sense for the Heat, at least contract wise. I mean, they could always let this expire and they would have some money to work with in this free agency right here. But you would actually have a chance to negotiate in free agency with someone here in this year before you have to worry about your contract extensions kicking in for like Tyler Hero, Andrew Wiggins, Jaime Jaquez, and whoever else, Nikola Jovic, that sort of thing. So yeah, that gives them a lot of flexibility to trade for Jalen Green. They wouldn't have to give up that many assets, and I think he's still probably gonna be a flippable player down the line ever, especially when he gets close to like a 1-year deal. He's not going to be as hard to move as maybe Terry Rozier is. I think Terry Rozier might be one of the harder players to move, but I mean, then again, expiring deal, it's not the most pressing concern for them anyways. But giving up pick 20 is not really a big hit to them. I think they would like to keep the pick, but the Suns adding another 1st-round asset, which could either be selected at 20 or used to trade up, could be pretty important for them. The other team I'm looking at is the New Orleans Pelicans, and of course CJ McCollum, another expiring deal that makes sense to trade. For me, I think the trade looks like CJ McCollum in pick 7 for Jalen Green in pick 10, so the Suns move up 3 spots and move off of the Jalen Green contract, while the Pelicans add another contract that makes a lot of sense in their team sheet. They really don't have money to make moves with $176 million, and then they're gonna have $137 million the next year, but it's still maybe not quite enough to sign a player that they want. I think it's mainly like, do they want any 26, 27 free agents? If it's not really a pressing thing for them, making this Jalen Green trade makes a lot of sense. Drafting at 7 is a pretty decent position, but most teams are mocking Kaman Mallock to this team. They just drafted Yves Missi at pick 7, or not pick 7, at pick like 21 last year, or pick 20, I think. And Yves Missi was pretty good last year. I don't know if it's really the time to just say let's draft over him, but Mallock's really good, and is exactly going to be the player I would want the Suns to draft at pick 7 if they traded up for it. So it's a big question, like, how do they want to manage their money? How much do they believe in Jalen Green? Are they okay with moving off this expiring deal in CJ McCollum? And how much do they believe in Yves Missi, who in my opinion, I think I really like him. I talked about him a lot last year before the draft, and not that surprised he ended up being pretty good this year, even if it was a product of opportunity for a very injury-riddled Pelicans team. He did look very good, and yeah, I think Kamar Malak might make a lot of sense for them. It just depends on how much they believe in him. And that brings us back to the Phoenix Suns and what they're going to do here. They're not going to keep this core. They're not going to keep this core. We know that. This is a mess. And they're going to find a way to swing something. It's probably going to be Jalen Green moving. It's probably going to be pick 10 moving. I could see the Suns try to give up more future assets to swing that pick number 10 either up to 7 or try to acquire future assets and move down in this draft. There's not like a whole lot of players that make sense at pick 10 for the Suns. As I mentioned, it's really these raw young point guards that you're trying to take a bet on, and that's not really the Suns MO at all. And I don't really expect that to suddenly change. I don't know. You'd really have to really believe in one of those players to take them at pick 10. And I'm just not sure the Suns do at all. I mean, you can also look at players like Jace Richardson and Carter Bryant at pick number 10. And I just don't see it. Derek Queen is another guy. Like, if you believe in him, maybe you go ahead and take a chance on him. But then again, you just got out of the DeAndre Ayton situation just a few years back, so yeah, I don't know if we're going to be doing that. Jace Richardson might actually be the pick, as we know with the Suns' many ties to MSU with their owner and I think a few other staff members being tied to MSU. Maybe that ends up being the pick, just believing in that guy out of MSU who looked pretty solid. He's just undersized and might necessarily not be the best defender, but yeah, could easily be the pick of 10 if they do stay there, is to take the MSU guy, as generic as it might sound. And yeah, I mean, I just think there's a lot of options for them. I think there's a lot of flexibility in trading down because, as I said, the pick just doesn't make sense at 10 unless it's Jace Richardson. I would say that's maybe the only guy that, like, otherwise, if you're convinced of one of these other point guards, as I said, it doesn't make sense to pick at 10. You want to move down, you want to draft a guy like, in my opinion, like an Asa Newell or a Thomas Serber or like even like a Cedric Howard, Rasheer Fleming, that sort of range of like wings or bigs or just any sort of size to build around Ryan Dunn, Oso Ighodaro, Devin Booker, and just kind of like this few core players that the Suns have in place. If we take a look at their team payroll, I know I never pulled that one up. You really are looking at like a Devin Booker, Grayson Allen, Royce O'Neal type of core with Ryan Dunn and Oso Ighodaro. These are kind of your 5 guys under contract long term that you really are concerned about. And there's really not much else on this roster, as you can see from this contract situation. It's about these 5 guys, and these 2 are still going to be like flippable contracts. You're going to be looking to maybe get back some future draft picks for these guys and maybe try to, see what you can do in building up this team in other ways, like all these minimum contracts that we signed. But yeah, and trying to get second round picks. I think second round picks are also pretty important. The Suns, other than 10, own pick 29 and I believe like pick 52 or something. I'll take a look at that on my phone, but the Suns, yeah, they have, pick 52 and pick 59. I think they got an extra second round pick in this draft as well. So 52 and 59. Looking at those picks into the late first round, it's kind of hard to project who will be around at that sort of pick. But, like if a Danny Wolf drops, you're looking at him, weird sort of big, and just giving me some good old Darius Arch type vibes. And I love that. Like, definitely would like to see that around our team. I don't know, like a Maxime Renault is a guy that a lot of people were talking about with the Suns. He's a really rangy center who makes sense to next to a guy like Devin Booker, who's likes playing with a lot of space. Again, Darius Arch, one of our most effective lineups during that 2021 run was with Darius Arch on the floor with Devin Booker. So just having that floor spacer that we just really have not put around Devin Booker at this point, like taking a risk on him would be a good idea. Even if you're redrafting at the center position still makes a lot of sense. Kobe Brea apparently measured in at 6'7", I think. That's pretty crazy. If you want to take a chance on Kobe Brea, that's another nice shooter. Would give you a lot of flexibility to move on from Grayson Allen if you wanted a guy like, if you picked up a guy like him in the second round. And yeah, the second round is kind of weird. There's just like a lot of older players. There's not like a whole lot of young talents that are really going to drop. If they do, that's when you try to move up into that early second rounds and, you know, move a bunch of future second round picks plus the second round picks you got to take a risk on like one of these overseas guys like a Noah Penda or Hugo Gonzalez or, I don't know, Ben Seraph. I don't really know. But that late first round pick, you want to take one of those higher upside guys, in my opinion. If you get like a Danny Wolf, Liam McNeely, Nolan Traore, Will Riley dropping to that pick, that's the type of player you just instantly draft. You don't really think about it too much, considering all the older players who don't have as much upside that are going to be right around that pick range that just don't make sense, like a Ryan Kalkbrenner, Cam Jones, John Broome. Like, I don't really think those guys make any sense for the team. It's about taking one of those guys who drop. Nick Clifford is one of the older guys. I don't expect him to drop to 29, but if he was there, you'd also take him, even if he's, I think, like maybe the oldest player in the draft. He's pretty darn good at basketball. But yeah, I think that's about it here. As I said, I would expect the Suns to keep making moves. This won't be the end, and if they do make another trade, I might just be right back here talking about it. And yeah, watch out for Jalen Green. I expect him to be moved in the next week. I'm not sure. I'm sure we'll get some more rumors in the next upcoming days, so keep an eye out for those. And I would expect to see that number 10 pick that's going to get traded. So keep an eye on that. I would expect that to happen as well. Dylan Brooks, as I said, expect him to be on the team. And yeah, the Suns have moved on from that massive contract, and they've gotten more manageable contracts. Even if it was an expiring deal, you got some sort of assets back, especially if you can flip Jalen Green for another asset. This will be a very good situation for the Suns to be in. So yeah, Suns did a pretty darn good job here. Rockets are going to be somewhat happy with Kevin Durant. I just think that's like a situation where their hand was forced. They weren't giving up that much relatively, especially if they're not intending to sign Kevin Durant long term. Then they just get to move off of those contracts, give themselves a ton of cap flexibility. So it's a pretty good deal for both teams. And I think if that's the case, then okay, you know, you live with the trade. Neither fan base is going to be the most ecstatic, but it's solid enough, and we'll see how this trade pays dividends for either team. But that about covers it. Thank you for watching. If you made it all the way to the end, maybe hit the subscribe button and stay in touch, stay in tune for maybe next time I drop a video, even if it's after a year, you know, then you're around for it. I'll see you in the next one, whenever it is. Goodbye.